Hello viewers, welcome to Cars with Ben, and in today's video I'm going to talk to you about 6 cheap luxury cars that can make you look pretty well off if you are on a budget. Now, they aren't my favourite cars, but some of them I actually quite liked. So if you like this video, consider leaving a like, subscribe. Let's jump straight into today's video, and I hope you can enjoy it. Coming in at number 1, I've gone for one of the most expensive choices, yes, I will admit. It is a Bentley Continental GT. The Bentley Continental GT is now, the original is actually fairly cheap. I say fairly cheap. You're looking at about low cost of around 15k for a pretty high mileage one. Now, that is a lot of money, but for a Bentley Continental, that is still really excellent, in my opinion. Now, Bentley Continentals are obviously quite unreliable, and given the age of these now, being at least 16 years old, the original ones are a bit of an issue. So that is just something to bear in mind, and you will have reliability issues, and running maintenance of these cars is very expensive. But to own a Bentley, I think is pretty awesome, and to look rich while doing so, if it's that something you're into, is definitely pretty cool. I'd quite like to own one of these. And obviously you've got that incredible interior, all leather, and still to this day looks very fresh. Yes, it is 2005, and it does have that sort of old style of era interior, but I still think it looks really modern for today's cars. And if you saw someone on these, you'd think they were doing pretty well. So I had to include it with the most expensive one on the list. But if you want a high mileage Bentley, this is your choice. Coming in at number 2, I've gone for a slightly different option, the VW Phaeton. Now, this is a really interesting car because the VW Phaeton, as a lot of people might not know, it's not a very well-known car, was released in around 2003, and it was an £80,000 Volkswagen. Yeah, that's right, an £80,000 Volkswagen, which is absolutely crazy if you think about in today's world. No one would buy that, and as a result, no one did. But it is one of the most luxury cars that VW have ever made to this day. And now you can buy one of these for as little as seen on Auto Trader and eBay as £4,000. That's with an 80,000 mileage car, so obviously bear in mind that it's going to have some reliability issues and you will want to maintain it. But as with all these cars, they will have high mileage for the car you're getting. But to look very executive in a VW and something that no one has, I think is quite cool. So had to be on the list, and just something you just never see. You see a lot more Bentleys, but you never see a VW Phaeton. And you'll know you've seen it because it's such a long version, the extended wheelbase of the usual car VWs that are made. But a very rare car, and every time I see one of these, I always think that used to be a very expensive car, considering the depreciation. But definitely hits the list for this video for making you look rich while spending very little as possible. One thing I also like about these is it's just so executive and chromy a little bit, so it's just so different from VW. Coming in at number 3, I have gone for the Jaguar XJ. Now, on the list of all the cars I've done today, out of the 6, this is my favourite. I would honestly own one of these because it is a Jag for starters, and the XJ from 2005 and 2006 was still actually not a bad car to own. Yes, it was a bit thirsty being a Jag, and reliability being a Jag was probably terrible at the time, but it was better than the old XJ. And now, if you look at the new XJ, that is a lot more expensive to buy, of course. I really like these ones because really you can pick these up as little again as £4,000. But if you want a good one like this one, perhaps you're probably looking at about 5, 6 if you want to pump a bit more money into it, which is something I'd probably do if you want it to last longer. But if you want it just for a short term, less than a year, then maybe just the £4,000 will do, and you could probably get a 70,000 mile XJ. Now, the interior isn't as nice in an XJ, and to be fair, I can understand why it just doesn't look as good. And people have complained about the styling, which does look a bit beefy, and I have to admit, I don't like it. But a Jag, and for such little money, I can't deny it would be a nice little project to own, and the interior of these is very comfy. Coming into number 4, I have gone for the Porsche Cayman. Now, the Porsche Cayman actually is not as cheap as I first thought when I started doing the research for this video. Believe it or not, Porsche Caymans, despite looking like Boxsters, have held their value quite well. I mean, not in terms of its newness, but to be fair, these used are around 15k, and that's a bad one. If you want a good Porsche Cayman, you're probably looking at about 20k. I suspect it's just because of the styling and it was just quite unique. But if you want to look good and have a Porsche and still look rich while doing it, while your neighbour thinks, what is he doing? A Porsche Cayman could probably do that. I absolutely do like the back of the Caymans. It's just a bit different, I have to say. And yes, I will admit, compared to a new Cayman, which is about 60k, I do prefer those. But just look at the interior of this. I love that beige Porsche interior. I don't know why. Yes, it is a bit of a midlife crisis, but a Porsche Cayman is awesome. And there's still quite a few of them because the reliability did actually do quite well for the Caymans, as well as the Boxsters, which is sort of sharing the same platform. So I had to put this on the list because it is, again, up there for my favourites, but I was really shocked at how expensive these were still, which is a shame because I'd love to own one. Coming in at number 5, I have gone for a Range Rover Vogue from 2006-2007. So again, another really cheap option on the list to make you look quite rich. Now, of course, being a very thirsty Range Rover, this is the only four-wheel drive car I have put on the list, but I absolutely love Range Rovers. Now, these are around 5k, but if you want a good one, you're probably looking anywhere from 6 to 7 because these depreciated so much. However, because they're off-road cars, they do have their own little class. Just looking at that boot, you can just see how much space you can get in a Range Rover. And I'm sure anyone who's owned a Land Rover or any Range Rover will know how great they are. Of course, owners always note that reliability for any Land Rover is pretty terrible. So that is something to bear in mind. But just look for a full service history and ensure that it's just generally been taken care of throughout its life, and you're probably good to go for about $5,000. Now, I have to say these are quintessentially British. I do love them, but I just don't know if I'd want to take on the maintenance of a Range Rover. But again, it does make you look pretty successful if that's what you want. I mean, I'm not saying you have to, but these are all cars that do that for you, and I think it does show you a little bit about all the cars that you can drive on a budget potentially. The Vogue is generally the one you'll want to go for, and with an interior like that and high riding precision, it's definitely not something to look down upon. But for the majority of people, I can understand why the high mileage, unreliable Range Rover might not be as popular unless you own maybe a garage or you were a mechanic. And coming in at number 6, this week I've added a final number 6. I'm not usually do up to 5s. So I've gone for this one. I really hate this car with a passion, but there's a reason it is on here. So it's the BMW 7 Series from 2005. So all from the same area, these cars. And the reason I've gone for the 7 Series is because this is, despite looking horrific and having a terrible iDrive system, BMW 7 Series really do make you look very rich and executive. A bit like the Phaeton. Coming in at as little as 5 to 6 grand. Even now, I think you could probably get them for about 3 actually if you had a terrible one. You are looking at 120,000 miles roughly, which I know is a grey area for people. But these 7 Series are absolutely amazing for just giving you that really ultra comfort. And you could probably drive very far in these without really feeling tired. Now, I do have to say, I do like the interior. And the long wheelbase versions are good. So you want to look for a 2005 model in these. Anything a bit newer, it will start to creep up in price. You'll probably start to go for about the 10 grand prices, but that will be newer and less mileage. I do like the interior again, and it does have a lot of space back there, so I have to appreciate that. And BMW 7 Series, and for me, one of the ugliest cars on the market, but I do still like it in terms of its making you look executive and being a pretty cool looking car in terms of looking rich. Anyway, guys, that has been my video today. I hope you've enjoyed the video. If you have, leave a like, subscribe, comment. I make weekly car content. I'm Cars with Ben. I'll see you in the next video.